I'm more concerned with Oregon's offensive line than Dillon Gabriel.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Who is Oregon's best defensive player? Some more fallout from Wisconsin, all coming up on today's show. And I don't even know if, as I record the show, I have an answer to that question, but I'm going to try to answer it in 8-10 minutes time or so. But two things that I didn't care for watching Oregon's game against Wisconsin. Now, am I overreacting? Don't think so. The overreaction is Oregon's going to get exposed, Oregon's bound to lose, upset alert against Washington. That would be overreacting. Properly reacting is recognizing that there were challenging factors for Oregon going into that game against Wisconsin. Road game, 8th straight week, winds were blowing, all that sort of stuff. 100% a factor, though that certainly goes both ways. That doesn't mean it had to look like that, because it didn't. It didn't have to be as close as it was. And Dillon Gabriel has put together back-to-back kind of stinker games for the first time this year. And he wasn't terrible against Maryland, but the passing offense wasn't great. He was under 200 yards for the first time this year. And if you go back to Oregon's worst two games of the year against Idaho and Boise State, yeah, he made a mistake and fumbled against the Broncos, but also hit some downfield shots and overall had pretty good numbers. And he completed 41 passes against Idaho in the season opener. It just wasn't pushing down the field just yet. But this aberration for Gabriel the last couple of weeks, I think can be rectified if the offensive line settles down a bit. I think the bye week will be a great thing for the Oregon offensive line. But with Gabriel, if you go back and watch the game and certain moments or plays that he missed or throws he didn't make, I just go back to that drag route against or in the red zone when he was trying to hit Justice Lowe. And on second watch, I said initially I think Justice Lowe maybe scores. He probably doesn't, but he picks up a few yards at the very least if Gabriel puts it on him. I don't know if the wind was a factor on that throw. I've heard all over the place, yeah, it was a really windy day. Maybe that one just got away from him. Maybe that's all it was. But back-to-back games where Gabriel has gone from, boy, he's at the top near the Heisman odds nationally to now it's he's fading a little bit in that respect. Do I care about that a ton? Not necessarily. Like, would I love it for him? Yeah, of course. Of course it's great for Oregon to have a Heisman Trophy winner. Do I think he's going to be able to get there? Probably not. But what I do want Oregon to be able to have is Gabriel playing at that sort of level where he is in the conversation to be a finalist. Because that's when Oregon's offense is at its best. So getting Marcus Harper back, getting Tez Johnson back, I think those are clearly important pieces. But when you watch the plays that Gabriel missed or throws that he didn't make or incorrect reads or when he was just a little off the mark, it's hard to know exactly what led to those particular moments. But I still don't walk away supremely worried. Yeah, he made a couple of bad reads. Yeah, he made a couple of bad throws, one of which happened to come in the red zone. And I thought we'd done away with that. Apparently we haven't. Hopefully that gets cleaned up. But the last time we talked about Dillon Gabriel having that problem, it got cleaned up. So I have confidence that Dillon Gabriel can get back to being the sort of guy that he was for the last month and a half, where he's slinging it all over the yard. Like the version of Dillon Gabriel that we saw on Saturday doesn't feel like the same guy who went for over 300 yards, a couple touchdowns, and no turnovers against Ohio State. Didn't feel like he'd have that in the bag. But he's still the same guy. Just because he didn't play that way on Saturday doesn't mean that's how he's going to be the rest of the year. And I think a lot of it stems from the offensive line. So I thought this was, since the Boise State game, the worst day the offensive line has had. I think they struggled to create explosive runs. Jordan James had a longest carry of 14 yards in this game. And that's been somewhat of a perennial issue. You haven't seen big explosive runs from the Oregon ground game this year. And I think part of that is they're playing some good defenses. Part of that is Jordan James, a very physical downhill runner. He's not the sort of shifty guy who's necessarily looking to break a big run like DeAnthony Thomas used to back in the day, or Charles Nelson, or any of those sorts of guys. But is he capable of having big runs? Yeah, of course. And so too is Noah Whittington. But I felt the ground game was good enough. That's it. And I was disappointed in the rushing attack against Wisconsin there. Because on a day where the weather isn't necessarily conducive to passing, where you have a tough environment going against a defense that's been really good defending the pass so far this year. They've got an NFL guy or two in that secondary, and I think that was on display. The Wisconsin defense did a lot of things really well. Oregon could have been better in a couple areas, but the Wisconsin defense also did a lot of things well. But they have struggled defending the run this year, and that's what I was most disappointed in. I was most disappointed in the offensive line's inability to consistently give Jordan James the ability to carry the offense down the field. And there were sequences, there were glimpses of it, but Oregon was under 4 yards a carry in this game. And I was hoping they'd be better. I was hoping they would hit 200 yards. I said that on last week's, I think, Thursday show going into it that, hey, I'd like to see him kind of pop off and see the running game carry him. And that didn't happen. And I think a big part of that is that they're shifting around the offensive line at the guard positions. They're trying to find the right formula without Marcus Harper, because they'd settled into a rhythm with Harper at right guard and Nishad Strother at left, but now it's a three-man rotation, or at least it was on Saturday. You've got Kavika Rogers getting in there, you've got Davey Uli getting in there, and you've got Nishad Strother playing. And they're moving around all the time. They didn't look completely settled in. And yeah, I do think a part of that is this was Oregon's 8th straight game, and it turns out it's really hard to do that. I'll have more thoughts on that later on today's show. But Dillon Gabriel was sacked twice, and I know that for most college football teams, this goes back to the first world problems discussion that I've brought up on the show before. For most college football teams, a quarterback getting sacked twice, that's okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. When I went back and watched the game a second time, Gabriel was under pressure a lot. And when you get under pressure in a football game as a quarterback, newsflash, you're not as good of a player. You're not going to be at your best. When Gabriel did have clean pockets, he made a lot of the same sorts of throws that we have seen him make throughout the year. And don't forget, how often is Terrence Ferguson going to literally stumble over the turf monster when Gabriel throws a dot down the field on third down? Like, there were just a couple of key moments that I think swung the momentum back to Wisconsin. If Oregon punches it in on that second drive and goes up 10-0, I think that game is completely different. If Terrence Ferguson doesn't fall down, you feel completely different, because the numbers would also be different in the passing game. But I thought that the running game had glimpses, had moments, and Jordan James is really good, but it was not consistent. It was not steady. And that's what I'm looking for. And I think the entire interior of the offensive line didn't have their best game. I thought Josh Connerly got beat way more than we're accustomed to seeing him get beat in a single game in pass protection in that matchup. And sometimes you got to tip your cap and say, yeah, those guys are scholarship football players at a Big Ten school too, and they just played really well. So I coming out of that game was not thrilled with Dillon Gabriel's performance, but I was far more concerned with the offensive line. On the interior, didn't think they had a great game. They weren't consistently able to move around that Wisconsin defensive line. I thought they should have been able to. And if you ask me right now, going into Washington in the Big Ten championship game, what's the number one thing Oregon needs to fix? It's the interior of the offensive line. Not so much fix as get right, get back to where they were. Maybe the bye week is all they need. That's certainly what we're hoping for, is that the bye week is able to fix those sorts of things. But I think you see Gabriel get back to being the guy that he was if you fix that problem up front, because I'm trying to think. Michigan maybe a little, because Gabriel had to move around a lot. But even in that game, I felt like there were a lot more clean pockets and a lot more time for Dillon Gabriel to feel comfortable and have the ability to just sit there and slice and dice. And I don't think he had that as often as he has in prior points this season. And that's why things struggled on Saturday. Do you think I'm crazy? Well, I don't know. Some of you might. Somebody out there could. Let me know in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Let's go back to the defensive side of the ball and get all that negativity out of here. I said Monday's show was I'm Captain Positivity, which I was. Today is, well, let's talk about the things that aren't so good. But I tell you who is good. Well, there are a lot of guys on the defensive side. Who's Oregon's best defensive player? I don't know. I don't know, man. That's a tough question to answer. I'm going to answer it coming up next. First, let's talk about Roy. Locked On Ducks fans, listen up. You need to download the Roy app. You've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they are revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money, and here's what you'll absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers. Boom. It's that simple. So you can show your support for my Roy Player of the Week, and it's Mateo Uiagalelei, who is also the co-Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week for that performance he had. Is that who I'm about to say is Oregon's best defensive player? You'll just have to keep listening to find out. But in the meantime, make sure you download Roy, because Mateo is this week's Roy Player of the Week here on Locked On Ducks, but there will be another one next week, and you can contribute to all these guys throughout the season. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com to join today. That's right, joinroy.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every single team, yes, every player on the Ducks is there. Roy, support the players, change the game. Do you want to go to Oregon's next game against Washington? Well, Game Time is a place where you get tickets, of course. Of course, they have Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for, and you get panoramic views in the app from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect upon arrival. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Fresh haircut, fresh ice cold water for a second segment sip. Who's Oregon's best defensive player? That question came in from Jonathan. You can be a part of the mailbag as well. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. Priority access given to those who are Locked On Ducks insiders. That link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. You get all sorts of other perks as well. Jonathan asks, who is Oregon's most important defensive player? Now, is this a distinction between best defensive player? I don't really think so. There could be a scenario where you see that as the case. I don't apply that here. So on the surface, I think a lot of people would look at Jordan Burch and say, well, I mean, he's just been phenomenal. Oregon's undefeated when Jordan Burch doesn't play this year. Bet you hadn't thought about that, huh? Yeah. I mean, they're undefeated when he also plays because they haven't lost a football game yet. But Jordan Burch is someone who'd be very near the top of this particular list. And to say that he's Oregon's best defensive player, he can be. Derek Harmon can be. But Harmon wasn't even as good as Jamari Caldwell on Saturday. Both were really good. Both were really, really good. Anytime you generate pressure to hold a guy under 100 yards passing and keep a team under 4 yards per carry, your defensive line, they're playing really well. So both those guys are really good. Well, Mateo Uiagalelei is the one who's the reigning co-defensive player of the week. I know this sounds like a cop-out. Just bear with me here. I promise I'm going to explain this. The answer to this question always lies on the defensive line, but changes each week. And that's a great thing. Great thing for Oregon. If you think back to a defense that gets referred to plenty on this show because it was very good, 2019 Pac-12 and Rose Bowl champions with Kayvon Thibodeau, who came on later in the season as true freshman, Verone McKinley on the back end, Brady Breeze, Javon Holland, Diamondor Lenore, who just got paid big time in the NFL. Speaking of the NFL, how good is Bo Nix? Really, really good. Really, really good. Thomas Graham. Anyway, that unit was really good. And I think this Oregon defense is even better than that one. And one of the reasons is that the defensive line depth and linebacker depth, but particularly the defensive line, is a lot stronger. So that unit's secondary was just awesome. They made plays. They were good in coverage. They could tackle. They did a lot of things really well. The defensive line was also solid. They were a real solid unit. And then by the end of the year, once he'd gotten into the groove, Kayvon Thibodeau became, arguably the most disruptive defensive lineman since Haloti Ngata. DeForest Buckner would have to be in there as well. This defensive line's ability to have any one of those top three guys, Burch, Mateo, Derek Harmon, be the best defensive lineman on every given week is a really good thing, and it's legitimately how I feel. I can't land on one particular guy because this past week it was Mateo. But against UCLA, well, Mateo was kind of quiet compared to Jordan Burch. And Derek Harmon was phenomenal against Ohio State. So was Mateo. And I can make the argument for Jordan Burch, but Oregon's defensive line has played great. They played great against Wisconsin without him. They played great against Ohio State without him. They sacked Will Howard a couple times. They kept the running game wildly in check beyond what a lot of people thought they were going to be able to without Burch in there. And of course, Oregon's defensive line is at its best when Burch is wreaking havoc. Go ask Maryland how disruptive he can be. On any given day, it can be any one of those three guys. But a great defense. There has not ever been in the history of football a great defense that is not disruptive up front. And Oregon's depth is really, really good. But over the course of the season, I don't have one of those guys that I automatically lean to. Maybe you take Burch out of that top 2 discussion by a slim margin because Oregon has produced so well without him. And thankfully, we haven't had to see this defensive line without Mateo or without Derek Harmon. But man, it's any given week, any given play, any of those guys can look like the best or the most important defensive player for the Ducks. So that's where I come down on it. I know it's not a definitive answer, but every time I watch Mateo Uiagalelei play, he looks like a first-round pick. The speed he's got coming off the edge and the power that he's got, that's the biggest difference in his game. His growth from last season to this year is a year ago felt like he was strong enough to play and fast off the edge, and that was his greatest attribute. Now, I feel like he's not just strong enough to play, he is a really strong guy who is hard to move around. Some of the run fits that he has had, I don't think that's the correct verbiage, but you get what I'm trying to say. Some of the sequences he's had this year defending the run have arguably been more impressive than the times he rushes the passer. And he had a sack and the interception and a pressure here and there, like the big hit on third down. He can do a lot for this Oregon defense. Jordan Burch can do a lot for this Oregon defense. And going into Washington, but especially the Big Ten championship game, Oregon's an 18.5-point favorite against Washington. It's a lot of points. That's a lot of points. Not talking about that right now. Just thought I would throw it out there. Going into a Big Ten championship game, I'd really like to have Jordan Burch there. Why? Because I'd like to be as healthy as possible. But would I place that as high of a priority on my get back from injury and get healthy list as Marcus Harper? I would not. Because the drop-off on the defensive line is minimal somehow, and somehow it feels like there isn't really much of a drop-off. It's like, well, Burch isn't there, so that means another guy has to step up, and then Tatum Tuioti and Mateo Uiagalelei are just studs. And then you've kept the interior guys, knock on wood, healthy this entire season. So it's a tough question, and I'm curious what you guys think. Legitimately curious. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter, because I can't go in one particular direction. I think as I flush out my thoughts on this segment, I can say it's not Burch. But if you pick Jordan Burch, I don't know that you can take that as a ridiculous take. I don't think you can have that definitively be, no, it's definitely not Jordan Burch. Well, if I had to eliminate a guy, I guess it'd be him, because I've seen the defensive line play well without him in it. But then that leaves you with Mateo and Derek Harmon, and oof, these guys are really, really good. Honorable mention for best or most important defensive player. This is where I'd separate. Jeff Bossa might be the most important player that isn't always the best. 4th-year guy, 3rd year with Lanning and Lupoy, signal caller on defense. I don't think you can overlook that particular factor. On the back end, Jabbar Muhammad be the top guy in the secondary. Brandon Johnson probably be a close second. But best player on defense for Oregon, I'd go Mateo or Harmon or Burch. Any one of those three. It just depends on the week, and that's a great place for Oregon to be right now. I did want to give a shout out, and I got this message from a Locked On Ducks insider out there for someone who I didn't shout out yesterday on the show, but someone felt was worthy, and as I thought about it, I went, yeah, I think you're right. How about Ross James? Ross James was this close, this close, to being the guy that ices the football game there on a 3-yard carry, and if he had, would have been immediately legendary. But Ross James, 49.5 yards a boot in a windy, cold Wisconsin day with a long of 61. If you go all the way back to the first season Dan Lanning was in charge in Eugene, the punting was last in the Pac-12. And something I said in the offseason was, hey, this is part of having a great defense. It's more important to fix the personnel and whatnot. But you know how much a defense can be helped by having a good punter? Ross James' ability to flip the field, how important was that? That was a defense and special teams game for Oregon on Saturday night, and special teams guys deserve their shout out. And if Pat Herbert throws a block on the fake field goal, Ross James runs for a first down, maybe runs for a touchdown, quite frankly. But he certainly would have picked up at least one more yard. Alas, it's all okay. Oregon won. Don't forget that. Don't forget, amidst all the things that Oregon needs to work on and can improve and questions we have about this, that, and the other thing, Oregon won the game 11-0 and facing bye week this week. I like their chances against bye. I think they cover the spread too. Yeah, I do. Hot take alert. Oregon will cover the spread against bye week. So the bye week comes after 8 straight games. Is that the Big Ten just screwing Oregon? Is that what it is? Some people have that perception. I'm going to push back on that notion. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals or jump over molten lava to get one, but Mint Mobile makes it easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. And guess what? It's going to be that easy for you to get said plan, which has got phenomenal nationwide 5G network, the nation's largest 5G network, as a matter of fact. To get started, you just have to go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Remember when they got rid of unlimited plans? Mint Mobile said, no, we're not getting rid of the unlimited plan. We're keeping it around. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Check them out, mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. All right, so Bud, Locked On Ducks Insider, sent in a question about whether Oregon was overconfident going into the Wisconsin game, because before the season, people like myself, for instance, had looked at the schedule and said, boy, Wisconsin is the biggest trap game on this Oregon schedule. I believe there is a show, a Locked On Ducks show at some point in time. One of you can find it, perhaps. I mean, I could find it, I suppose. But I remember doing it that said Wisconsin is Oregon's biggest trap game on the schedule because you have the look-ahead factor of Washington. It's late in November and all that sort of stuff. But going into the game, people like myself were very confident. So Bud asks, were Oregon fans overconfident going into that game? My answer is perhaps slightly, but not that much. Because you look at a game on paper and it's worth discussing, so you have an expectation going into the year. But as the season progresses, well, you have to change your opinion if you get new information. Indiana coming into the year wasn't supposed to be a good team. Got to change your opinion there. They're a top 5 team in college football. Big game against Ohio State this week. Oregon will face the winner in the Big Ten championship game. But if, assuming no other chaos ensues the last week of the regular season, Ohio State plays Michigan at home. They're going to win that game handily. Indiana plays Purdue, and Purdue absolutely, positively stinks. So were Oregon fans overconfident going into this game? I actually had a couple of predictions from Locked On Ducks insiders that were close, and it caught my eye a little bit like, wow, really? But then when you think about it and say things out loud like Oregon's playing its 8th straight game, all in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's at home, off a bye, in November, and then the win was a factor. If you know that going in, yeah, okay, you can see the game getting a little crazy. All the more impressive that the win was reportedly, at least impactful to some degree in that game, that Atticus Sappington was absolute nails. Gosh, I'm glad to have that guy as Oregon's kicker at the moment. But I don't think Oregon fans that thought they would win big against Wisconsin were overconfident. If Oregon had played its best football, even with the clear fatigue factor and being dinged up, I mean, Dante Manning was able to return to the game, but he got hurt early on. Justice Slow got hurt early in the game. Like, clearly, the long grind of a football season was wearing on the football team going into that game. But even with all of that, if Oregon had played better, they would have won. They would have covered 14.5, 13.5 is where the line closed. Sharp money came in on Wisconsin, and they were, of course, correct. But I don't think Oregon fans were overconfident to look at a team that is capable of winning the national championship and a team that is fighting for bowl eligibility and saying, look, regardless of condition or location, if Oregon plays to their standard, they're going to win this game by a lot of points. They could have. They very easily could have. In the first quarter, you kept waiting for Oregon to pull away because, well, it was pretty clear that they were better than Wisconsin. The Badgers were not going to move the ball a lot successfully all night. And guess what? They didn't. They just did not. They were under 300 yards total offense. So, no, I don't think Oregon fans were overconfident, at least not to a major degree. But Then Bud sent in another question, and I got a lot of questions about this. Wanted to address the 8 straight games factor. So Oregon played its 8th straight game, all in the Big Ten this past week because the bye was before the UCLA game. Oregon went Idaho, Boise State, Oregon State. Bees are having a tough go of it right now. Then there was a bye, and then they got into Big Ten play. And the questions that I get are usually, and when I say questions plural, I'm talking more than 5. Not as many as 15, but somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, which for one singular topic, when I'm not prompting you guys on it, that's a lot. So the questions are often sent in the vein of, well, how come the Big Ten screwing Oregon like this? Why is that? 2 thoughts. Number 1, is this the first time a team has ever played 8 straight conference games in the Big Ten? That's the first thing you should look at. Number 2, will this happen to Oregon again next year? If the answers to those questions are no and no, then this is just how the schedule works out. And it's why shows like this one talk about the schedule a lot. It matters. There are seasons that have not been able to reach their full potential for football teams because the schedule's just really tough. Florida comes to mind. They're the best 5-5 team in the country. They're probably going to end the year 6-6, but they could end the year 7-5. But still, 6-6 is a really good year. If you gave Florida an easier schedule this year, guess what? They'd be an 8-9 win team, and your perception of the program would be very different, even amidst all their quarterback injuries. So I went back and did a little bit of digging. For anyone who thinks, well, the Big Ten was just trying to stick it to Oregon or screw them or do this, that, and the other thing, the last team to play 8 straight conference games was Ohio State. Or at least that was one of them, because I started diving into various team schedules. I looked at Michigan last year, and Michigan had the bye at one point. Ohio State, though, played Notre Dame, had a bye, and then played 8 straight Big Ten conference games to end the schedule. That's how their regular season came to a close. They were playing Michigan at Michigan the last week of the regular season for their 8th consecutive Big Ten conference game. With the way that schedules work out, somebody has to do it. It becomes clear. I didn't look at every other Big Ten team because there are 18 of them. But once I was that quick into figuring out, oh, wait, this has happened before. If it happens once, that's the way that the rotation of the schedule probably worked out. If it happens again next year, then I will come back and say, all right, this is odd. Why does Oregon have to do this again? Nobody else has to do this. But Ohio State, do you think the Big Ten is trying to screw Ohio State? Because I thought the conspiracy theory was that the conferences are trying to elevate all their big brands. Doesn't really fit that particular narrative. So not concerned about it. Oregon's gotten through it unscathed. They've got the bye week, and it's all right. It's all right. We'll see what the schedule is next year when it comes out. But no, I don't think the Big Ten was trying to make a jab at Oregon or whatnot by giving them 8 straight games. It's just the way it works. Ole Miss had to go to LSU. And LSU was at home off a bye, and Ole Miss was playing their 7th straight game this year. Them's the breaks. It's the wheel of fortune. You spin the wheel, and something comes up on your schedule every year. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. That's just the way it is. And guess what? The great teams are able to overcome that, and Oregon's a great team, hence why they're 11-0. Closing with this from John, touched on his question on yesterday's show, asking about the Wisconsin game. Why do you think Wisconsin was able to have success on outside blitzes? Who should have responsibility for the outside blitzer? Why couldn't our receivers get separation? These are different questions. I'm not sure that the receivers didn't get separation. I just don't think Dillon Gabriel always had the time to throw. Going back to my first segment on today's show, the offensive line is my number one area of concern coming out of the Wisconsin game. It's been good in pass protection, and it's been okay in run blocking the last couple of in the last couple of weeks. That's it's fine. It's fine. There's nothing glaringly wrong with it, but is it at its full potential? No. So hopefully they're able to have a better game against Washington in a week and a half's time. But with regards to the blitzes, I can't answer that question. I can watch the game and say, well, he came off the edge. Why did a Johnny Cornelius slide inside? Which, by the way, disrupted the timing of the 3rd and goal when Oregon kicked the go-ahead field goal at the end of the game. Dillon Gabriel was trying to hit T-Ferg. They came with a 5-man blitz. Everybody ended up having kind of a 1v1. Gabriel had to get rid of that ball a split second early, and T-Ferg contacts the guy at the top of his route when he doesn't necessarily have to, and the timing is just barely off, and it glances off the tip of his finger, but Johnny Cornelius slides inside. He doesn't hit the outside guy. So they end up going 2 on one guy, and then one guy is free, and Gabriel knows, well, I have to get rid of the ball now. I don't know whose fault that is. Was the back supposed to go and pick him up? Should Gabriel have slid the protection to the right, gotten him into the right call? I don't know, because there are only about 7 different factors that go into just running a particular football play. OC calls one thing, OC calls a kill play. You got to get the quarterback has to get him into the right protection. Look at the defense. Maybe there's a check with me in there. If they rushed up to the line and they still have time on the play clock, like a lot of different things go into calling a football play. It's why it's such a mad scientist sort of run. I mean, all coaching is to an extent, but football in particular there. I think Wisconsin had a good defensive game plan. Wisconsin fired their offensive coordinator after the game. They didn't fire their defensive coordinator. I wouldn't have either. I was pretty impressed with Wisconsin's defense. I also think Oregon's offensive line should have played better. But Wisconsin was able to have success off the edge. Like the big sack that Dillon Gabriel took when it looked like Oregon was marching down the field, and all of a sudden it all just kind of stalled out. They bring a corner blitz and no one picks him up. And, the corner had a good disguise. He didn't show that he was blitzing off the edge. And then Wisconsin rolled the coverage really well. That was a 4-man route. Everybody but one guy was open. T-Ferg was wide open on the complete other side of the field. But as a quarterback, you're taught to replace a blitzer. So if you see a defensive back or a linebacker blitz, you're supposed to say, hey, there's now an opening in that defense. Well, Wisconsin just defended it really well. There's really nowhere to go with the ball. So he sees the blitz coming from his front side off the corner, and then he looks downfield. And if you go look at the wide angle shot of the play, there's nowhere for him to go with the football, really. He could maybe try and sandwich it to Evan Stewart, but I don't think he can contort his body well enough there. So I think sometimes you have to tip your cap to the other team. They executed the game plan really well, and that could be on Dillon Gabriel. That could be on the offensive line. It could be on Will Stein, or it could be on a combination of all of them for not being able to adjust or anticipate that particular sequence. Like, it's complicated. It is wildly complicated, but I think it was Wisconsin's defense had a good game plan. They executed well. They've got some really good players. I think the bigger concern for me is less so the pass protection and more so the consistent ability to be able to run the ball. Because I thought I'll talk about Will Stein more tomorrow. I thought in the second half, he wanted to run the ball not almost exclusively, but he wanted to become more run heavy, and the offensive line just wasn't creating the lanes. But remember, Oregon won the game, and that's what matters most. Only team in the country with an unbeaten women's basketball, men's basketball, and football team as I record this show. So that's pretty neat. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.